All right. What a great reminder of why we're all here. That affordable housing is about improving the lives of others. Um, I want to thank Jonathan for setting the foundation for this conversation today. We really appreciate that. It was wonderful information. And now I have the opportunity to bring us to our session one, Getting Real About Real Estate, the current state of housing. In this session, you will hear, we will discuss starting Augusta Waynesboro housing market and its submarkets to orient attendees on market trends, housing challenges, and their implications. The person that is bringing us this information is Mel Jones. She's a research assistant and associate director of the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech. Mel leads housing research in Virginia and across the country. Mel's expertise is demonstrated in her recent work, New River Valley Regional and Local Housing Study, Fairfax County Consolidated Plan, and the Loudoun County Unmet Housing Needs Strategic Plan. Please help me welcome Mel Jones.
All right, friends, I'm stuck at the thing. That's okay, probably, because I'm breathing for two. And so I get really excited, but then I also get really out of breath. So here I am to talk to you a little bit about your housing market. I'm just going to start off with the for sale market for you today. And I want to address a little bit of the most recent question that was asked. So we have an aging population. We're not unusual. Across the nation, we have an aging population. And today, we are trying to house the two largest living generations ever. It used to be that people would die off a little faster. And I am not a medical expert, but we have made some great leaps and bounds that have made our elders very vibrant and very much with us today. And they have worked their whole lives in our community, and we owe them housing. The elders that we saw before in the video, the elders who are among us today, the elders, that we imagine being later in the future, we want to be securely housed. So we owe them housing. But we also owe their children and their children's children housing. And trying to house the two biggest generations ever, the boomers and the millennials, is no easy task, especially when we face a housing industry that is deeply cut by the 2008 recession and then punched one more time by COVID. So, in COVID, we took this industry that was already smaller than it has ever been, relative to demand, that is, and we increased materials cost, we increased labor cost, we decreased the labor pool, we introduced lots of supply chains that we still struggle with today. So we're in kind of a hard place, and that explains where we're going now. So there's been lots of resorting going on since COVID. People sort of cut loose from their offices and able to move, to places where they could find more affordable housing. That drive to qualify doesn't matter as much anymore because I can sit in front of my laptop at home every day and do my job. So a lot of resorting has happened, and that's been really good for some communities in the greater central Shenandoah area, because where they had a lagging housing market, now they're starting to feel like, all right, our housing market is going, and they have a balanced housing market now. But then the places that are within MSAs, sort of the core centers like you guys are, the SAW MSA, are starting to experience some extreme tightness. And that's what you're seeing here. Days on the market, median days on the market is 6 in our region. So about half the houses sell in less than 6 days. Some of us are used to that now, right? The housing market that we bought our first house in was kind of like this and still is like this, and we feel like it's normal, but it's not. It's unhealthy. I've highlighted in green sort of the healthy range, right? That's where we want to stick. We want sellers to feel like, okay, I need to sell my home. I've got a new job. I got to go. I know I can sell it in about a month, a little more than a month. That's okay. And then we want buyers to be able to go look at a couple of homes, get an idea what they want, and then make an offer. And after they make that offer, have an inspection, so that they know what's going on in their house. Sometimes this is the first opportunity that a home buyer has to really learn about their house. Following that inspector around, they learn things like, I have a panel box, and it needs to be replaced. These kinds of things are really a learning opportunity for first-time home buyers. So we want them to have that. And we want them to be able to use the financing that meets their needs best. But when we're in this 6 range, where we live right now, there's no time for that stuff. In fact, first-time home buyers might not even have an opportunity at all in this region. So sellers are feeling pretty good. And I want to acknowledge, and I'll do it a little bit later, sort of the situation of some boomer sellers, right? They have faced stagnant wages their whole life, since the 70s, And because of that, their entire wealth is in their home. That's their whole thing, right? And they know that they're not very diversified. We just started learning, I feel like, in my generation, which I'm also an older millennial. My husband is the oldest millennial, born in January of 1981. Anyway, I feel like we just started learning about how important it is to save for retirement. And my husband and I, we're somewhat diversified, but still the vast majority of our wealth is in our home. We were first-time home buyers 7 years ago. So the boomers have all of this wealth, and it's in their home, and it's not that much wealth, and they know that it's critical to pass that wealth on to their children to give them the leg up, right? The only reason that I was able to buy a home is because my in-laws were, nice enough to give us most of our down payment, right? And some of the stuff that Jonathan was talking about, these sort of structural differences, and discrimination points in our history are related to the ability to provide intergenerational wealth. So the boomers know how important that house is for them, their stability through their old age, and their kids, and their kids' kids, right? Because the millennials aren't doing that great on building wealth. So it might be the boomers' generation's wealth that goes to the millennials' kids. So they know how important that is, and anything that you might do to change that wealth scenario for them is dead scary, right? Because you're not only threatening them, you're threatening their kids and their kids' kids, right? And so they're feeling kind of happy right now. Their prices are going up. Let's see, how do I go forward? There we go, thank you. Prices are going up, they're going up a lot. It feels like, okay, instant wealth, I'm doing good, I'm gonna be able to share this with my kids, And so they're feeling good, but it is meaning some tough times for everyone else, including their kids. It's all sort of connected, and I'll get there, later. So these are pretty steep increases throughout the SAW region up here on the first bullet. And higher home prices right now are accompanied with inflation, so higher prices, higher cost of living, and increased financing costs in terms of interest rates, right? So fewer households can afford to buy. And again, it's all connected. So if I can't buy a house, I'm gonna rent a house, right? That's the other option. So I'll stay in the renting market since I can't buy a house. And the market is becoming really competitive. So now buyers with cash, and you can think of those as those established households that have a lot of equity in their home, and if they're going to buy another home, they get to transfer all of that equity over to the new home. So people with lots of assets or investors who are just interested in either flipping homes for sale or flipping homes to rent. So lots of cash buyers out there. It's hard for people who need financing to compete with cash buyers because cash buyers can close a deal pretty instantly. If you are getting financing in the conventional market, you may be able to also get approved pretty quickly. But if you need a USDA loan or an FHA loan, or you need some supports from, let's see, the Planning District Commission or Virginia Housing, it could take a little longer for you to get approval, which may mean that you can't make an offer fast enough to get that house. So that's something to consider, that the rapid pace of this market is just making people who need financing, which is most first-time home buyers, kind of at a disadvantage. In probably the most critical places throughout your region, they just can't even think about looking there anymore. So they'll start to seek alternative markets, right? I can't live in Saw. Let me go look at Roanoke, or let me go look at, maybe Rockbridge, or, there was a company in Blacksburg that our market got so tight that they moved to Northern Virginia. And why did they move to Northern Virginia? Because of housing costs? What? But the fact was that there was more availability, and that the market was moving faster, and that because it was an even more active market, they were building faster. And these employees weren't, low-wage employees. They were a tech company, and they made a lot of money. And so it just made it easier for their employees to be in a bigger market. Okay, but that's the danger, right? That they're going to start leaving here. The people that we need to work here and who are our community and our families they're going to leave. So let me transfer to talking about the rental market a little bit. Mel Jones, the researcher, Mel Jones, the advocate, you, community partners, you want the vacancy rate to be between 2% and 7%. Now, if you're a property manager and I tell you I want your vacancy rate between 2% and 7%, you're going to drop your jaw and say, hell no, Mel Jones, right? Because you want the market to be tight so that you can always have all of your units filled, and you can charge higher rents, et cetera. So I know I'm saying something that is a little controversial here. But the reason that I want your vacancy rate between 2% and 7%, and I'm going to flip to the other side, so just take note of where CoStar, which is a data source, says that the vacancy rates are for Stanton, Waynesboro, Stewart, Strath, and Fishersville, okay? So y'all are on the tight side here. Fishersville is arguably healthy, but everybody else is lower than 2%, all right? Okay. So the reason that I want your vacancy rate to be between 2% and 7% is because if it goes lower or higher than 7%, then landlords don't have incentive to invest because they feel unsure whether or not they're going to be able to lease up their property to a reasonable level that they can pay their bills, right? So I want property owners to be investing in their units, and I want them to be making enough money that they can do that, right? So if they get higher than 7%, they're going to be like, I don't know if I can invest because I don't know if I can get my money back, right? But if they go lower than 2%, then they're in this wonderful world where instead of them competing for renters, right, renters are competing for them. And how do renters compete for them, right? They pay higher rents, that's one thing. They accept poor management, and they accept units that aren't upgraded, that aren't maintained, et cetera, right? So they also on this end don't have an interest in investing. And as a community, part of what we really want to see is the housing last. In the US, we have created this economy where we need housing to last and grow in value over time because, again, that's where our main wealth building is taking place, right? So when we make a housing decision, we make like a 100-year plus decision. And we expect that housing to stay in the market and keep working. So that's why I'm trying to keep us in that range where there's plenty of investment in the rental market. The other thing you start to see when the rental market gets really tight is landlords becoming pretty choosy. And there's only certain ways that they can become choosy. And so one of the most common ways we see them become choosy is by saying you need to make more and more, you need to have more and more money in pocket in order to make me feel secure that you're gonna pay rent forever, even if you sort of aren't living there anymore. You need 3 times the rent up front in order to get one of our units, right? And that is them sort of doubling down on the renters are competing for us, not we're competing for the renters. So that's why I want you to do. So you guys are pretty tight on sort of both spectrums, which is essentially starting to leave people out of the housing market. I'm going to go with what Jonathan told me to do, which is talk about economic development first. So the first thing I want to let you know is that most people in this region are working. 70% of households have at least one worker. The rest of them are our elders who have worked their entire lives and are retired. There's really, in your region, 1% of the population who may be unable to work for some other reason. But generally, we are talking in the entire region that people are either working or have worked their entire lives. Workers earning at the median in 5 of the top 10 occupations need a housing cost less than $800 per month. So how many of you live in a place that you pay less than $800 a month? A couple people can benefit from that? Yeah. How many people live in a place that costs less than $800 a month and don't own their home free and clear? Okay, so there's a couple people benefiting from stuff that is in this affordable range. And then workers earning at the median in 3 out of 10 of the top 10 occupations in our region need housing costs less than $600 a month. So a lot of people serving this community need housing that doesn't cost a lot, is sort of the moral of this story. Many of them are in service industries where they make lower wages. We need all of those people in order to keep up sort of the standard of living we're accustomed to. And given all of our elders, boy, do we need personal care aides in our community. And likewise, we need folks, in childcare and other critical industries. But those folks can't afford the median rent even when they're earning in the 90th percentile. So here's a hard to read graph, but you'll get a hold of these slides later and can really dig in. Here you have listed the top 10 occupations in SAW, and you see 3 bars associated with each of those occupations. The first one is a single earner at the median. The second one is a single earner in the 90th percentile. And then the third yellow bar is 2 workers earning at the median for that occupation. Then the horizontal lines cutting across there are rents. Let's see, Stanton is red, Augusta is green, and Waynesboro is blue. So the dotted lines are rents, and the solid lines are our median owner costs. And you can expect, since this includes all owners with a mortgage, people who got a mortgage a while back are benefiting from a lower payment than people getting a mortgage today. So if you're facing this market today, you can expect those solid lines to be a little bit higher. There are a number of these occupations that in no circumstance can they afford to buy a home. And again, they need to buy a home. That is their main way of building wealth in this country. If they cannot buy a home here, what's the best move for them? Go somewhere else. Yeah. And so all of these people who can't access home ownership, they're going to go somewhere else. So we're going to not have personal care aides. We are not going to have fast food or counter workers. Cashiers are over. Sorry, you cannot check out at the grocery store anymore. That's kind of where we're headed, except that these people are a little bit trapped, right? They can't afford housing anywhere, right? So instead, they pay too much of their money toward housing, and they are very housing insecure. So let's talk about those people who are vulnerable. And it's more people than you think. We'll get there in a second. But this is median earnings by family type. And so on the left, you have married couples. Two-earner households do a lot better than anyone else. In fact, it's almost a requirement today that you have a two-earner household in order to access housing at all. If you are a single parent, especially if you're a woman, you cannot afford median rent at the median. Dads do a little bit better in SAW. And this is interesting because it changes a lot over the central Shenandoah region. It's not the same story for every MSA, Harrisonburg versus Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and Rockbridge. But women aren't doing as well as men in SAW, that's for sure. So women, single parents, have a tough time affording median rent. An adult living alone, so again, single earner woman would have a hard time paying median rent when she's earning the median among women. And then again, we got to take care of our elders. If you don't own your home free and clear as a senior, you are in a tough spot, right? Yeah. So 12,600 households in Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro are what we call cost burden. They spend more than 30% of their income on housing and are maybe making choices between housing and other necessities. If you are a moderate income household, maybe those choices look like between housing and transportation, between housing and educational enrichment for your children, between housing and medical care. If you have a lower income, these are choices between housing and food, right? Housing and clothing, more basic necessities. And we have almost 5,000 community members that are in that kind of situation and probably at risk for homelessness should they encounter any sort of unexpected expense. So a system failure if you own your home, a medical emergency, anything like that. Could put you kind of in a pretty vulnerable situation. 35% of cost burden households are seniors 65 or older. Again, making choices between housing and other necessities. And when you own your home free and clear, and you make choices between housing and getting your prescription, let's say you choose getting your prescription, this manifests differently than you're missing your rent or you're becoming delinquent on your mortgage. Most homeowners don't become delinquent on their mortgage. They can work with their finance agency and get some plan there to pay their mortgage. Instead, they defer maintenance and they forego upgrades in their home, which certainly threatens them personally, but also threatens our community, right? Because again, those houses are 100-year plus decisions. We have to take care of them if we want them to be an asset for our community. If our elders are unable to take care of them now, we need to support them, right? They've been living in that house for 40 years. They've been taking good care of it, and now their income doesn't keep up with their increasing costs. They're not able to do that work anymore themselves. They used to be able to, right? And now their house is going downhill, and that certainly hurts them, but it also hurts all of us as well. So what does all this mean? What do we need to do? First and foremost, we need to build more housing. Supply is much smaller than demand. And it means more units can be absorbed, right? So when you go to public meetings, you hear a lot, like we've entitled X number of houses, and that's all for now, right? We don't need more. We're going to overbuild. We're going to overbuild like we did before 2008. Headline, we did not overbuild prior to 2008, right? We already were barely keeping up, and then we tanked the building industry, and now we don't build nearly enough, okay? So anytime you hear we're going to overbuild like we did before, BS, okay? Complete BS. And the other thing that I would like localities to look out for is too many entitlements that aren't being built. So I have a lot of communities come to us that they've approved a lot of housing, but that housing isn't actually coming out of the ground. And that in and of itself can be dangerous for a community, so I don't want to dispel that entirely, that we shouldn't have too many, or that we can't have too many entitlements. But generally, especially when you're in a community like this one where days on the market are 6, rental vacancy rates are less than 2, you need all the housing you can get. Let's just approve it all day long as it's going to be high quality and well managed, right? We need more housing to even get to a balanced market here. And we want sellers and landlords to at least have to compete a little bit for the people who are going to live in those homes. And just kind of underscore here that we can raise wages all day long so that people can afford housing. But if we're in a housing shortage situation, that just means sellers and landlords can raise their price. So here in SAW, you need more housing, not higher wages necessarily. It's another kind of thing that people get on about. We have to stabilize and anchor households in our communities. And I think if we go back to the other slide, 42% of our community is having what would be considered a low income, right? So it's almost half. There's a lot of people that are experiencing this situation. They need support, they need stabilization. And how are we gonna do that? We're going to increase the diversity of unit types. As Jonathan said I would. We need more small attached units because 65% of households only include 1 or 2 people. So when we're thinking about adding diversity into our housing stock, which is mostly 3-bedroom units, we need to think about smaller units and attached units. And then we have to intentionally include those who are being excluded. So we have to dedicate housing to low-income households because they cannot compete with high-income households for that housing. They just can't come up with 3 months' rent. They might be able to afford the rent, right, at the median, but they cannot afford to save 3 months' rent to deliver to you because they're paying 50% of their income for housing. If you want them to save 2 months of rent, that means they need to be homeless for 2 months so that they can save it, okay? So it's just an unreasonable expectation, and that's why we have to reserve some for them. In the community land trust situation, we have to make, in order to fulfill the IRS obligations, we have to make some of that below market. But I've often made the argument that if we could just deliver some market rate housing that is just reserved for people in the low and moderate income where they don't have to compete with boomers who have so much asset and investors who have so much cash, then they could attain that housing, right? So part of it is just having the opportunity to lay down the money, Yeah. So, but won't the market just adjust, right? Like, it'll take care of us, right? It has, we're saying we have lots of demand and the supply will come, right? Well, we've been waiting for 10, 20 years for that to happen. We could keep on waiting, and I don't really think it's the best approach. And the industry, sort of likes where it is to some degree, where it can kind of serve this margin up here, the very wealthy, and make a lot of money on those custom-built homes. So they don't have a lot of incentive to start trying to provide housing to people in the middle. And like I said, building hasn't caught up in more than 10 years. We've been waiting for it too. And we need more industry, right? We need more subcontractors, we need more builders, but private capital and government money isn't moving into that space. We're not offering small business loans to somebody starting an HVAC company, right? They still have to get a second mortgage on their house if they want to start that company. And remember what I said about that house being your only wealth? Do I really want to go out there and mortgage it again so I can start a company that I feel like is vulnerable because my dad got put out of business in 2008? Maybe not. And so there's like lots of money to be made out there, but again, you're asking a household to risk the little bit of wealth that they have. And the income gaps are growing, right? This isn't getting better. More and more people are becoming vulnerable, right? And it's starting to impact entire communities, this vulnerability, right? Even the people who come out to public meetings and say, not in my backyard, they're doing that because they feel vulnerable, right? And governments, local governments who have more on them, right, are trying to balance that. They're residents who are saying, I cannot risk my wealth, but also people who are saying, I need to live here, I work here, please let me live here. You know, they're balancing this tough environment. And it just kind of continues on, right? The market isn't going to correct it. We are both the market, right, the consumers of this housing, and the market failure, right? The market assumes we're going to be rational, but we're walking around with broken brains, right? and we're scared, and so we're not rationally thinking anymore. In fact, new housing being built beside you, whether it's multifamily, whether it is subsidized or not, actually increases the value of your property. That's what research shows. If we were walking around as rational actors, we would say, please build new housing in my neighborhood because all the housing was built in 1950 and my values are going like this. But if you build a new house beside me, they could go like this. But that's not the way we act, right? So we are the market failure because we're not acting rationally. And so what we need to do is pull together as a community and understand that we all benefit from the creation of new housing, and that we all benefit from our community members and our neighbors being stable, productive members of our community who want to stay here and contribute, right? And so we have to create or support creativity and change. YIMBY has to be what we all do. We have to demand investment and action, both political will, and I'm sorry to say, increase taxes, friends. No free riders, right? We, as the federal government, have asked nonprofits to take care of our housing issues. And those nonprofits have expended all the creativity that is available to them. They have worked night and day. They are underpaid. We are treading on their hard work and goodwill to do this for less than they could in order to provide housing for everybody. And anybody who's not part of that system is free riding, right? So no free riders. We've got to start all garnering the empathy and taking the risks to, as a community, house our entire community, stabilize our entire community, and understand that in the future, maybe not the future we're alive for, but in the future, that if we do these things, we will continue on with the American dream. If we don't do them, it will be lost. So, questions?
Yes. Mel, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Just hold on one second. We've got time for one or two questions from the audience. One or two questions. My colleague Chris has the microphone. Chris is not that fast, so...
Yeah, the first thing that you said that surprised me is rural like we are. I work in a lot of rural communities, many far more rural than here, and rural communities are in a really lucky position right now. I work a lot for the Federation of Appalachian Housing Enterprises and do research for them. And their last theme for the past 2 years has been Meet the Moment. Rural communities have now experienced market health that they haven't seen in a really long time. And they have new money being invested in their communities, both from individual people moving there, but also interests from the federal government and investors in growing those communities because of the housing shortage. So the most innovative rural communities have really bootstrapped all of that possible investment and are thinking about how to piece together various demand segments and get new housing built at the biggest scale that they can. The other nice thing about being in a rural community is you have a very creative federal partner in the USDA trying to change the way they do things in order to respond to demand and serve more families. The one sort of problem that you face is that the low-income housing tax credit doesn't work very well in very rural places. But again, you're a little bit lucky in the state of Virginia that we're trying to find another alternative to sort of supplement that, and that historic tax credits are pretty workable in your communities. And so I don't have a single community for you to look at, but I will say that across rural communities, there's lots of different creative things going on in Elkins, West Virginia, in Blackstone, Virginia, and I could just keep on naming. And if we can put all of those little creative things together, we can do immense work in rural communities and really respond to demand that isn't, hundreds of thousands, but is smaller and somewhat more manageable. The barrier there is that the capacity is not as big, and it's harder to string together those creative ideas. But I do encourage rural communities to talk to other rural communities and see what they're doing right in terms of getting capital through. And my newest favorite kind of approach that I've heard recently, that actually comes from an urban place, but it makes sense for rural communities, is acquire, renovate, rent, sell. You don't have as much access to capital that's willing to work with you in rural communities. So that rent piece gets the cash flow in the door that gets local banks interested. So it can be a stepping stone to creating more home ownership opportunities. You just have to realize, what the banks are looking for. So there's lots of opportunity, yeah.
Awesome. We have one more question.
It's more of a comment. My name's Andrea Jackson with Virginia Organizer. I just wanted to say, bless you, Mel. Man, you might be a researcher, but you was preaching. And I just want to say that it's affirming that the things that the nonprofits have been advocating, you have said. And I want to ask if, one, you can send this slide personally to all of the municipalities, Stanton, Augusta County, Waynesboro, because they need to hear this, and you have done the research, as well as do you actually work with municipalities so that, let's say you're like, okay, y'all got a problem, where are we gonna fix it? And I also want to thank you for saying, like, wow, rural areas have, is a good opportunities, because I've heard that, wow, we're not like urban areas, so we can't do X, Y, Z. And I'm trying to figure out, we got housing situations in a rural area. What does that got to do that this not an urban area? So I hope that everybody got their ears is open and they willing to listen to this data, and as well as these stories, and get out of their comfort zone, and to really say that we got a problem. And I really like what she said. We got to come together as community. We got to stop playing around, and if we want community, we have to invest in it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, that's going to take us to our break. We are going to come back at 10:35 and for the next session. Also, we wanted to remind you that there are so many resources and assets in this room, and there is this Housing Summit participant survey that, if you don't mind filling that out at some point today and turning it in at the front, just lets us know that you're here. We're trying to asset map all the assets and resources in the community so that we can make sure we're bringing everybody together. So we'll see you back here at 10:35. Thank you.